to order. Because of some members' participation will be remote, all of our votes will be done by roll call. This meeting is being recorded. Number one, project approvals. I'll ask for a motion to approve the August 9th minutes, which you should have in front of you.
Second that.
Okay, motion made by Bob Mahoney, second by Dan Salvucci. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes.
Keith Wells not waiting. Jim Coughlin.
Yes.
Bob Mahoney.
Yes.
Jack Manning.
Yes.
Bob Mello.
Present.
Okay, I'll take that. Bob Mola.
Aye.
And Dan Salvucci.
Yes.
It's motion carries unanimous by all members present. At this point in the agenda, I'll introduce our project manager, Jen Carlson from Left Field, who will address the next several meetings on the agenda.
Hello, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yes. All right, so I'll take you through the agenda first and then we'll get started. As you know, we just went through the first item of the project approval, the meeting minutes from August 9th meeting. Next up, we will be reviewing DRA's contract amendment number 2. Then we'll take you through invoices. Both of those we'll be looking for a vote for approval tonight. After the project approvals, I will take you through a budget update, followed by a schedule update. Then I'll hand it off to DRA to take you through designer updates and lessons learned. Then we'll make our way through public comment, new business, and finally adjourn. All right, so for DRA's contract amendment number 2, this is an amount of $16,280. As you can see in that second column from the left, the amount of this amendment down the bottom total. So the scope of this amendment includes a visual inspection of the hazardous building materials, looking for hazardous building materials and identifying them. This will include a report identifying the hazardous materials and then estimate services, estimating the cost of what the removal of those hazardous materials might be if they are found. So the time frame of this work, correct me if I'm wrong, September?
Yeah.
Are there, this amount is in line with the contract amount that was provided with DRA's contract at the beginning, their estimate for this work. And there's approximately $18,000 left in that line item through the end of schematic design. So this is in line. Left Field does recommend this, and we reviewed it with DRA, and we recommend that be approved so that we can move forward with it. Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions of Jen? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
Someone would be in something.
Second by Bob Mahoney. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, a roll call vote. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes.
Jim Coughlin.
Yes.
Jim Harding. Oops, excuse me. Bob Mahoney.
Yes.
Jack Manning.
Yes.
Bob Mello.
Yes.
Bob Mola.
Aye.
Dan Salvucci.
Yes.
Sandra Palma.
Yes.
It's unanimous by members present. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, we have project invoices. The total of these project invoices is $84,000. It includes Left Field's invoice number 5 for services from August 1st through August 31st in the amount of $29,000, and DRA invoice number 2 in the amount of $55,000, also for services in the month of August. So it's a total of $84,000 we are looking for approval for
Any questions, Jen? Okay, if there's no questions, I'll ask for a motion to approve the invoices that have been presented.
So moved, Dan.
And second,
Second.
Bob. Thanks, Bob. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote again. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Jim Coughlin,
Yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
Yes.
Bob Mello,
Yes.
Bob Moore,
Aye.
Dan Salvucci,
Yes.
Sandy Ballmer.
Yes.
Unanimous by those present, motion carries. Back to Jen.
Thank you. All right, so I will take you through a total project budget update. This project budget does include all of the invoices and the amendment that was just approved. And this budget will be submitted as part of our OPM monthly reports to the MSBA. Those are due on the 12th of every month, so you will be getting a copy of that monthly packet next week. So take you through, as you can see in this, the first column, total project budget, $2 million is the total amount that is in the feasibility study budget. Moving to the right, there's authorized changes. Or this building, we make sure that that doesn't total anything. The revised total budget on that next line is still $2 million. That's all we have to work with, which is more than enough. Next is total committed. So you can see here there is $1,459,950 committed to date. That it represents 73% of the project budget. We still have plenty to pull from the environmental and site line item here and the other line item. You see have those two items that we pull from for amendments and budget transfers. There, the total spent to date so far of $248,500. Total spent to date represents 12% of the budget. So, as I mentioned before, the all of those invoices and the amendment that was just approved is represented in this budget. And we will be submitting this to the MSBA. Are there any questions on the budget as it stands? I will take them through the schedule update next. So I did send this this schedule overview out. And I'll send it out again when we send this packet out. This is sort of a zoomed in look at what to expect between now and the end of schematic design. So you can see the years across the top to kind of orient you with what's coming up in the next few months. The first light green section represents the preliminary design program, the PDP. You'll hear us call it. This is the first submission we're making to the MSBA. We are on schedule to submit this on October 5th. This PDP package includes the existing conditions evaluation that Carl and his team are doing, educational visioning that the educational leadership and other staff teachers participated in with New Vista Design, New Vista Educational Programming. They are the educational programmer working with DRA on the project. Next, there will be a draft educational plan. We're working on that right now with the educational leadership. That will be an outline of what the educational program is right now in the school, and looking forward what it wants to be, so that then DRA can take that educational plan, distill what spaces are required, how much space is required for each program, and design a building based around the educational plan. Also included in the PDP is the initial space summary, which really is the spaces aligned with the educational plan. There will also be an evaluation of alternative options. We'll be reviewing some of those options today. And there will be comparative cost estimates that will be estimated by the end of this month, in the middle of this month. So we will have some ballpark figures. Those are based on narratives and square footage, so they will definitely flux going forward, but they are a tool to compare options against each other when we move into the next phase, this slightly darker green here.
Jen, I interrupt for
Yes.
Mr. Chair, just for a quick second. Could you, Jen, could you address the issue of who needs to vote on what before we get to October 5th?
Yes, absolutely. So we are, the educational plan will need a vote from the school committee to approve it. And I believe we're targeting the 9/20 meeting for that.
Yeah, so it'll be an agenda item for the regular September school committee meeting.
Exactly. And so we'll be present in that as well, if there are questions or discussion, again, we can help work through that. And then, from there, we have on, our 9/28 meeting of this group, we need, an approval to submit the entire PDP package to the MSBA. So a lot of it you'll have seen prior to all that you'll have seen prior to that meeting. A lot of it will be existing conditions report. It as Carl would probably mention, it's a very thick book. When you get it, don't be overwhelmed. There are it'll all have been things that will either have reviewed or existing condition reports that are more technical in nature. So that also does give us some wiggle room if there is a need to for longer review, or if there are questions that come up on at the 9/28 or the 9/20 meeting, and we need to schedule another meeting. We are submitting on October 5th. That's the plan right now. So we have some wiggle room built in there if we need another meeting.
Yes.
And I almost forgot to mention, on the October 5th, that night, actually, we're having a public forum that is virtual, that first one.
We had talked about having public forums through December. The first that we would do virtually, and we'll push that out so that the larger community is aware. It'll give Jen, Carl, and the team an opportunity to unpack a lot of what we were already aware of. And with that being on the 5th, we should be able to take care of our other business on the 28th. And we're thinking also that the school building committee meeting on the 28th could also be remote, because it's likely to just have a few procedural votes, including the approval of the PDP.
So that will then move us forward into this slightly darker green phase, which is the preferred schematic report. So during that phase, that is when we will dig deeper into each of these options. We'll work with this group to we'll work with this group to create a matrix of criteria that's of priorities and things that are important to you as a district and a community, to read the matrix that will compare all of those options that Carl's going to share with you, to kind of rate them against each other, so that you have a solid understanding of each option, and hopefully can come to one solution that is the best solution for South Shore Tech. So that's all happening in that second phase here. That PSR, the preferred schematic report, will be submitted at the end of December 28th. That's in line with the MSBA's submittal dates in order to make their MSBA board of approval 2 months later. They take some time to review it. So part of the PSR are updated existing conditions evaluations. There's the final education plan. So again, we'll need another school committee just vote to approve the final version of that. And then, like I said, at the end of that, we'll also be submitting the preferred option There will be, this is also the time that the district enrollment, there, as you probably know and as we'll discuss, there's a range of enrollment options that are to be considered, and that will happen, that consideration is happening in the next phase. There's gonna be a ton of discussion between now and probably late November, early December timeframe to come to the right enrollment number for the school. So again, we'll be submitting another initial space summary, outlining all the spaces in the building and kind of aligning them to the MSBA guidelines, or at least comparing them to the MSBA guidelines are usually minimums. And so you may see that your needs are above their guidelines in some places. And again, there will be another set of comparative cost estimates at that stage. They'll be a little more refined than the cost estimates that you're getting in the PDP stage, but they'll still be comparative at that point. So a lot to do between now and just the end of December. Once you submit that PSR, then we're into the schematic design phase. And then it's full steam ahead developing that one selected option. So as you can see on the kind of yellow line there, after you submit the PSR to the MSBA takes 2 months to review it. We'll meet with the MSBA between submitting and that late February board meeting to just we'll know if they have any questions or concerns way prior to that February 28th meeting. And we'll be moving forward in the background with the development of the schematic design for that single option. Along the way, you can see there are other opportunities for community forums in springtime. And then the plan is to submit the schematic design for that final solution. We'll be submitting that at the end of June 27th of 2024. And that package includes the final design program and all of the spaces are required, the total project budget. So that project budget will be the one that we live with for the project at that point in time. We will know the cost for the project at that point. By the end of June, we'll have a pretty good idea of what the MSBA will participate in versus what the district will be participating in. The MSBA will finalize that over the summer once they have the package. Again, we'll be meeting with them to finalize that their participation number and the like. But we've done this a number of times, so we have a very good idea of what they do participate in, and we'll be paying attention to that, during the design process anyway. So by June, the end of June, we'll have some really good numbers that are reliable and that we need to live with it for the rest of the project. And other things that are included are we'll develop the exterior design, other schematic design documents, the DEFE submittal for special education spaces, and again, final cost estimates that tie back to that project budget. So are there questions on all of that? Because that is a lot.
Mr. Chair, if I can.
Go ahead, Tom.
Jen, the community forums that we're having in the fall through December, that we pick up again in the spring, is the purpose for the forums approximately the same? So during the schematic design phase, April, May, June, are we still seeking input on adjustments to design? Or is that second round of community forums more about raising the awareness of what this committee has already prioritized?
I think at least with April and May, we'll still be looking for feedback. I think we'll still be working through the design and still be, we're always looking for feedback from the community. But I think June is going to be more of here's the budget, here's what we're thinking, and we'll still be looking for feedback to, take the, kind of put this test to see how we were feeling about that. So that we know if we do need to do more value engineering or, work on design or price, so that is, the June one would be definitely to, raise awareness and.
As you might imagine, the forums this fall are gonna be about issues, should we renovate this building, should we build new, very high level kind of question. But next spring, we'll have focused on one preferred option. And people may still have those issues in their mind, but the meaningful input would be about the one design we're working on. You know, could this room be over here? Should the entrance be here? Could we move this parking to this part of the site? Might be that level of design questions during the spring.
Great, thank you.
Next slide.
Okay, so, we just wanted to review the status of some of these things, but, the main focus, you might, imagine, is on the preliminary options. We want to share those with you and get some of your thoughts and feedback here, but again, just so that everybody's familiar with what's happening and what will ultimately go into that PDP that gets voted on, at the end of this month. The existing conditions is the first, required segment of that. Judd could report on sort of what's happening, what's still happening.
Sure, so this summer, we've had opportunity to come out and tour the facility and start looking at it in existing conditions, as well as several of our consultants. One of the other things that we did to Sarah Carter from our office that spent 2 days down here, taking 3D photographs of all of the major locational spaces. And those have been pretty key, especially in some of the programming meetings we had, because we can pull up their shop and talk with them about it while we're all remote, but we can, you know, understand what they're looking at or what they're using the storage for. So that's been pretty helpful.
You might have seen those kind of photographs in real estate ads when you're looking at a house or an apartment. You can look around and up and down. Yeah, we have those photographs for the entire building now virtually. So it really helps us, particularly if this ends up being an addition renovation, we'll need that level of information.
And if I could, it's a very cool tool. You can, in that model, you can zoom in on different pieces of equipment and tag them and what they are, and it's very
You can actually even
powerful.
get up and if there's a decal on it, you can kind of read the decal and you know, well, what the piece of what's.
We can do measurements too, not really precise measurements that we would use ultimately in construction documents, but we could take the height of the ceiling in here from those photographs and things like that. So it's very useful.
Yeah, so we still have a couple more consultants that we're planning. We have 2 more early next week, and I think there's 1 or 2 more that we're looking to get out here. And they'll develop their existing conditions with assessments, and we'll have those as an appendix to the PDP submission. Yeah, so we are also, one of the options that we need to look at is the base repairs. If we weren't gonna do anything except bring the building up to code. So we do have a code consultant who is gonna be giving us a report, and Hazmat is gonna come out and do a walkthrough and give us a report, which will identify different things that we need to kind of bring up to code. We'll get that to our estimator and he'll give us costs for it. So that first one is just basically not looking at putting on any addition or anything like that. It's just, what's the cost to get it up to code?
That's useful baseline when people ask in the community, what if we do nothing? You know, what if we vote this project down? You want to be able to say, well, there's still issues that need to be addressed with the facility. And even without addressing educational issues, just facilities issues, there's a number there that you would, the way we think of it is that you would have to spend perhaps over the next 5 to 10 years, not tomorrow, not next year, but you know, cumulatively over the next 5 to 10 years, these are things that would need to be addressed. And just to share with you some other parts of the existing conditions report. This is a survey. I know it's kind of small there, but Webster Street's at the bottom. You can see the footprint of the building. We've highlighted the wetlands on the site, as well as the drain pipe that runs across the athletic fields, just to highlight some of the constraints that we're dealing with in this. And we're updating those wetland flags, and we will begin conversation with the Conservation Commission soon too, before we've designed anything, just to get their understanding and agreement that yes, these are the limits of the wetlands. so that everybody's working, you know, with the same information, so that we don't spend the next whatever, 6 months of schematic design and then find out, oh, well, that wetland is really bigger than you think it is, and it's gonna affect our design, so we like to get agreement on those lines early. Just another couple of points here, I should point out, I think I have most works here, yeah. The school, as you know, does own some property that is around the corner and has frontage
That's what I was just looking for.
on Main Street. We cut it off a little bit on the other plans, and it is cut off unfortunately from the, you know, the body of the school by some wetlands there. But we do think it may be useful, and we are considering possible uses of that property in conjunction with either on a temporary basis for construction phase, for parking, either bus parking or actually vehicle parking perhaps. And think about, you know, could we get across the wetlands, maybe with a boardwalk if it's just a pedestrian access and we want to use that. But again, we'll show you the options. You realize, you know, that trying to expand this building, the site has serious constraints. We want to be as creative and comprehensive as we can in looking at all the options. And the other option to look at too is the school does own a fair amount of property up here. This is north, this kind of, you can see the arrows down into the left. So this is kind of to the east of the school up here, but it is upland. It's wooded, it's near abutters. We know there are issues, but, and again, we'd have to cross a wetland to get there. But when push comes to shove, there may be value there and we may be able to access it to incorporate it into the project somehow. So, yes, Dan.
Knowing that like in my town, some of the builders, if there's wetland, is that possible for?
Well, in Massachusetts, there is an allowance that says you can fill up to 5,000 square feet of wetland. But you have to replicate it
Right,
somewhere else, sometimes 2 to 1. So if you fill 5,000, you have to create 10,000.
Right, because there's a lot of projects in my town
Yeah.
that's non-buildable, so they move to wetlands.
Yeah,
Second of all, you're saying build a bridge to go over the wetlands. If in fact, if we did that, could we implement a program in the school system, like agriculture, dealing with wetlands and maybe get some funding?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? You know,
I would suggest then that would be under the, that would be in the horticulture real.
right, yeah,
In fact, we're gonna have them work with a invasive species specialist.
yeah.
We've got some that we need to remove behind the house. So I think there's definitely some crosswalk there. There's definitely some work.
I mean, it may be beneficial that it comes under agricultural, you know, we say, okay, it's going to part of a program, like, you know, you gotta expand the carpentry or automotive, we're expanding agricultural, you know, and
Our
it's
campus,
just another way of maybe the
Right.
state will come in with some money.
our campus is, you know, we use our campus for our curriculum. This is just another way.
Yeah,
that we can do
exactly.
that.
We want to use the survey too, just to point out, you know, those contour lines, you can see them and you know the site. The athletic fields are lower than the school right now. And they're very close to groundwater, unfortunately, too. So that's another issue that has to be dealt with one way or another, with any kind of construction or expansion as we think about,
School.
you know, areas that are buildable. And the other, it doesn't show up, I think maybe it does, the septic field, there it is, those rectangles in the front yard. Serves the school right now as, you know, let's call it conventional sort of Title V septic system. But if we were to expand the school, which is in the cards here, we're most likely, high probability, we're gonna be into a wastewater treatment plant. So we have to think about that as well, and that too needs, you know, kind of a leaching field associated with it. We may well end up with still, you know, some kind of leaching requirement, and that soil there by Webster Street is the best soil on the site. And it's uphill, so we'd be pumping to it, but that's okay in a treatment plant. It actually helps pressurize the dosing, I think they call it, in the leaching
Could
field.
that leaching field, could it be under, we'll say, like baseball field? or-
It can be under grass area. I don't know if it can be under parking, under paved.
Right, no,
But-
you need to be able to get at it,
Well,
because I know they did that with, Foxborough.
Yeah.
The stadium, football stadium,
Yeah.
I think septic system is all underneath the football field.
So those are some of the site issues to be dealt with. And then the other thing that we're looking at is calling it, under existing conditions category is kind of the educational existing conditions in a sense. And one thing we like to do, you recognize your floor plan there, is highlight how your spaces meet, current standards. And what we used as a measuring tool here, and this is purely sort of a mathematical calculation right now, not the condition of the space, but just the size of the space against state standards. And we're using right now, as Jen mentioned, we're studying various enrollment options from originally from the current enrollment of around 650 students all the way up to the maximum that the state would support of 975 students. We already have agreed internally, we're trying to get the state to agree that the minimum might want to be 800 students or 805 technically, because Marshfield's already joined the district. We know there are going to be more students coming here. We know there's been a waiting list. So we chose as a baseline for comparison, the 805 number. If we had 805 students, how do these spaces match up against the standards? And it's a little variable in the shops because we have to project what the enrollment would be in each shop. And it's not a hard and fast number just yet, but we're close enough that we could do this kind of a calculation. Which says, we like to say it's like a traffic light, the red, yellow, and green. Red means it's below, more than 5% below the standards of the chapter that Betsy has for vocational programs. The state, for each kind of vocational programs, they have space standards that says, you know, in carpentry, for instance, you should have 225 square feet per student that at any one time is in the shop. So you can do the math and do the projection. Yellow spaces are ones that are close to they may be a little bit below, but probably in a renovation, we could leave those spaces and the state would allow it, even though they're slightly below the minimum standards. That applies particularly to classroom. You know, the state is what's called reasonable. If their minimum is 825 square feet, and we have a classroom that's 800 square feet, they won't make us move a wall just 6 inches or something to gain that at you know, significant expense. And the green are spaces and programs that would meet the standards and the projected enrollments at their current size. So you can see there's a fair amount of red and yellow on this plan that indicates, again, at sort of high level, that we, you know, need to expand the building. Certainly, we know that, and we need to expand certain programs in particular.
And another question,
Yeah.
expanding the rooms, if we build second or third story, like I've always said, like you go up,
Mhm.
that means that some of the classes that are on the first floor that we're using now are the, you know, we use that to open up on the different.
Perhaps we'll show you some options here in
Yeah,
a moment.
okay.
Yeah, but this is why we do this study, so we can understand. For instance, the existing gym. You know, it sort of works. I guess you can have a varsity basketball game there. You can have, you know, a certain size in the crowd on the bleachers, but if this were a new high school, prescribed, I don't know, I don't want to use the word recommended, but the allowed size for a high school gymnasium, even for this enrollment of 800 students, is 12,000 square feet. Your gym is less than 8,000 square feet. It's pretty significantly below. You could say, well, it functions, and that's a question we'll pose, you know, if you want to live with it. But things like the cafeteria, that it actually has a code requirement that says, you know, if you're seating X number of people, you have to allow 15 square feet per person. And if we're gonna have 3 lunch shifts, we can do the math and compare it against the space. We know for 800 students, you'd have to expand the cafeteria, for instance, by code. So there are things like that we're measuring against, throughout the building. And just to sum up at again, sort of a high level summary, we know there are educational deficiencies with the school, including some of those we just talked about in terms of size. There's also some, let's call it, lack of variety of educational spaces. That you do have a certain number of classrooms here. You don't really have, small group spaces, collaborative spaces that we see and desire in schools nowadays. Teacher planning spaces are kind of not up to par in what you'd want. As we said, the science labs are another one that again would have to be increased in size to meet state standards, where the MSBA wouldn't fund the project. So and again, those are significantly small. They're only about 800 square feet, and the requirement is 1,400 square feet for a science lab these days. And then just from a facilities point of view, there are certain issues too that, will be summed up in our existing conditions report. But we want to mention, the roof on this portion, or not this portion, the 62 portion of the building needs to be replaced. We were about to do it when the project got, invited into the MSBA pipeline. But it still leaks a little bit. In fact, if you look around here, you might see one, or down the hall, I don't know. The mechanical electrical infrastructure, particularly again in the older portion of the building, needs serious work. Renovation to the school would require basically, significant mechanical electrical work. And one of the real challenging ones in older buildings like this is plumbing, because a lot of pipes are under the slab. Yes, we can put a camera down there, we can look at the condition of them. If we need to replace them, or if we think, they have certain longevity, they are 60 years old now. It's a lot of work to tear up concrete slabs and put in new pipes. And so that's certainly, something that will kind of factor into the evaluation. There are some accessibility issues in the toilet rooms and making the entire building accessible. Improvements to parking and traffic circulation, particularly if the enrollment increases. So those are just some of the primary summaries there. And I won't spend a lot of time, but as we said, the educational program is an important part of the PDP. We have completed visioning. It had a lot of good outcome that we can incorporate into the educational plan of what people identified as being important, from goals, from educational priorities, from architectural priorities. We and our educational consultants shared some precedents of other schools and other spaces, and got people thinking about what this could be and so forth. And we got a little more detailed, and there were 3 workshops as part of visioning. Again, you can see some of the thoughts that came out of that, including, if you look at design patterns, more open and light-filled spaces, more indoor and outdoor connections, and a space that could be thought of as more the heart of the school, maybe a student commons kind of space. And then we started to diagram too in the visioning, and that will be part of the educational plan, these kind of relationship diagrams. How does the school program want to be organized? The diagrams, show adjacencies and connections where entrances would want to be, and how spaces are connected to one another. So those are, and all of these things were done kind of independent of whether the project's going to be an addition, renovation, or new construction. And in a way, we and the state kind of uses the education plan to measure against our proposed solution. They say, well, how well does your proposed preferred option satisfy your original goals? That's why the education plan is important. It's an important kind of guideline for all of us going forward. And so, as Jen mentioned, this is in progress right now in terms of bringing it up to speed and showing how things are being done currently, and how each it's sort of major department would like to do teaching and learning in the future. We're incorporating those goals from the visioning into the educational plan. And then we are gonna discuss, as you know, the school did submit to the Department of Education a so-called Chapter 74 viability letter as to what possible programs you might want to consider adding in the future that had, what was it, 6 or 7, 6 possible new programs. You know, that's a bit of a reach maybe to think about that much growth in incorporation, but we do want to discuss in the education program which ones seem more likely, even though all of them were kind of quote unquote approved as being viable. Doesn't mean you have to do them by any means or are committed to doing them, but we want to think about which of these, and likewise, we want to think about which enrollment do we want to focus in going forward. We don't have to make that final decision right now, but we do want to think about how that decision is going to get made and what the consequences of it are. So there's a lot of good thought going into that.
Can I ask you to comment a little deeper on the enrollment piece?
Sure.
Would it be reasonable to say that an enrollment decision ultimately made by the committee, that they would have cost information, the impact of a higher enrollment and how that
Yes.
impacts cost?
Yeah.
Right, so it's not gonna be an enrollment decision without knowing a sense of.
I'll show you in a moment too, how we do that. We haven't quite quantified the cost, but we quantified the size.
Yep.
And so you can do the math.
Thank you.
I was just looking at the script. So here's how we'll get to that point that Tom just made. This is another required form from the state. I know you can't read it, but that's what it looks like. And it's about 4 or 5 pages of these spreadsheets to list every space in the building, what you have currently and what you're proposing. And because we're looking at multiple enrollments, we'll have multiple of these forms, at least 3 that we know. We probably do the lowest right now, 805 students. We do the highest, 975 students. And we are thinking of doing something in the middle, maybe around 900 students. And I'll show you the preliminary numbers there. But it does a couple things. It does quantify the whole building. It says, you know, if a room is 900 square feet net, it also adds space for the corridors, space for the boiler rooms, space for the stairs. So you get a gross square footage for the overall building. And that's what you can use ultimately with the rule of thumb for cost per square foot to get to a total construction cost. Remember, that's construction cost. You still have to then add fees and furniture and equipment and contingencies to get to the project cost too. That we always want to be clear about that too. So we'll be doing multiple of these in that regard. The other thing this form does in the very right-hand column, it has the MSBA standards. So if we develop a program that says we'd like to build 20 classrooms, well, the MSBA's calculations for a school of 800 students may say 18 classrooms, because they figure, you know, 23 students, and they figure a prototypical, and they use their kind of baseline for every school in the state. It's not customized to your program. So we have to be able to argue another value of the education plan. Why do we need 20? And same, you know, with each category, if it does vary, the MSBA may say, fine, you can build 20, but unless you justify it, we're gonna say those 2 extra classrooms are on your own nickel. We'll reimburse for 18, 2 more, that square footage is not gonna be reimbursed. And they go through the entire program that way. If you want, you know, a principal's office and an assistant principal's office, sometimes for a small high school of 600 students, their formula will say, well, you don't get a principal's office, you don't get an assistant principal's office. And they're that picky. It's
If you can show a trend of student enrollment increasing, like, the industry is happening right now.
Yeah.
That would be probably the best way we can this state,
yes,
that we needed that extra space because of the enrollment. And the fact that we have other towns in the area that are looking to come here,
yes, yes.
you know, and, you know, we can say, well, we got Marshfield, but
Yeah.
at one time Hull was looking, but something happened.
Yeah, we have to balance being smart about, you know, having some flexibility,
Right.
but not overbuilding.
Yeah.
We need to show that the building could be expanded in the future too. They always want to see that at the state level. But we don't want to end up in a situation, you know, we have to expand the building in 5 years. We're talking about expanding it 20 years from now or, you know, longer, that sort of thing. Yeah. So here are the numbers that might interest you. Here are 3 enrollments, 805 students, 900 students, 975 students. And on a very preliminary basis, because we're still working on the program, these are the gross square footages that come out of our calculations. So you can see there's, from the lowest to the highest, there's a difference of, what, 40,000 square feet. You can multiply that, you can choose numbers, and I'll tell you, the projects we're estimating right now, just the construction cost alone is somewhere in the vicinity of $800 a square foot, believe it or not, with site work and building. It's incredible. You have to think about even escalating that.
Not going down.
So 40,000 square feet times $800 is what, 30-something million, you know? They're big numbers. And so it's a reason to think hard about what you want and how much and how big. And that applies not just to the enrollment, but some of the decisions in the programming too. We may say, well, maybe we can live with 19 classrooms, not 20, or whatever it may be, because space translates pretty directly to money, construction costs, as you know. And the existing building is only 125,000 square feet. So clearly, even for the lowest enrollment that we're studying, pretty significant amount of space has to be added to the school. So,
Fran? Okay. I'll get my minute.
is that Bob?
I'll have another question, Bob. You have a question?
I think he's all set.
Okay. If we're considering a second floor, you're considering a second floor over the entire building or just certain sections?
We don't believe it's practical to put a second floor on the existing building. We're thinking of multiple stories in the new construction to the addition portions of the building, or maybe even demolishing part of the existing building and building multiple stories, but not building on top of what's here. It's just too complicated, both structurally, it can be done structurally, but it's more about, you can't occupy the building when people are working above, from a safety point of view. So where are we gonna put all the people, all the students and teachers while we're building a new building? I've been in this business like 40 years. It's almost every school has come up and said, well, you know, when we planned this school, we always thought we could put a second floor in. I haven't done it yet. And it's not my own personal choice, but it just doesn't work out, typically.
So we worked at Southeastern Regional. They had a wing where they designed it to receive a second floor. And that was back again in the 60s. And when structural engineer looked at it, he said it's not possible for today's structural codes that they have to be able to do it.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, but there are some examples they'll show you that will speak to the multi-floor.
Yes. Just to mention that another requirement of the PDP is that we identify all these site development requirements. So we have had talks with Tom and others about the requirements here. And again, because the site is tight, there is going to be some compromising in certain ways here, one way or another, to fit everything on the property. So these are the options we'd like to share with you. The categories fall under base repair, renovation, addition renovation, and new construction. The reason base repair and renovation are grayed out, base repair is not really an educational solution. It only fixes what's broken, basically. It doesn't build you more space. It doesn't, right size the shops or things like that. And a renovation, as you can just see from those previous numbers, is not feasible, meaning staying within the 4 walls of the existing school. It's just not enough space. So that's not a feasible solution. We need to do some addition. So the 2 categories of solutions that we'll share with you are addition, renovation, and new construction. So again, just to orient us, we now have north up, just so that people see this. I know it gets a little confusing. We tend to draw plans for the addition renovation from Webster Street, because that's where you enter the building and people kind of are oriented that way. We tend to draw site plans with north up, that's where people used to looking at maps, and so, that's, and you can see the wetlands, on here, and you can see the extent of property now that the school does own. And so what we've identified as buildable areas, both for additions, around the existing school that, you know, we considered, are these areas, you know, roughly shown in the ovals. What we considered for new construction is basically the area that's developed. And even though it's close to the wetlands, and Hanover does have a, you know, bylaw that says you shouldn't disturb closer than 25 feet of a wetland, because it's already been disturbed. Most of these are outside the 25-foot buffer, but generally, we would look at that as the natural limit of what can be worked on there. So that's what our solutions consider are those areas. So the first three that we want to show you, we have 3 new construction options and 2 addition renovation options. So there are 5 design options, and you might think, well, then we multiply that times 3 because there are 3 different enrollment options, 800, 900, 975. So theoretically, we have 15 options on the table. Although from a design point of view, if we kind of design it around the 900, the sort of mid option, we can go a little smaller, a little bigger, we know it'll still work. We don't have to draw 15 different designs. We can draw 5 different designs. So the new construction shows 3 different ways to configure the building and a couple different ways to configure the site. Here again, north is basically up on these site plans, so Webster Street is at the top here. So this area here is where that oval was, and where your athletic fields are today, the track and football field and baseball field. So the notion with the strategy with all of the new construction option is that the new construction would be built basically in one phase while the existing school stays in use, in occupancy. Clearly, you lose the use of the athletic field, but otherwise, pretty much you keep everything around the existing building. The drive around, the service areas, and so forth. And the contractor builds a new school behind the existing school. In this case, it's a courtyard configuration. And one reason for studying this was during the visioning, there was a fair amount of support for the idea of having a courtyard, having an enclosed outdoor space that could be used educationally, could be used by the students, and so forth. So we did want to show one option that does that. It is a fairly tight fit, or I guess you could say very tight fit on the site, which would be a challenge both from a construction point of view, but also initially occupying the school too. When the existing building, when this new building is completed, say it takes a couple of years to build that, then they start, once you can move out of the existing, they do the abatement and then the demolition of the existing building. That's not gonna happen overnight. That's gonna be going on during the first school year that you're in the new building. So that means we can't build all this parking, we can't build the new athletic fields until that existing building is gone. So it's more like another year later, another year for the grass to grow, and it's another couple of years. Yeah.
Just a question, on this, what we have up here, how many students would be in that school? Would that be the 805?
This is the 900 students.
Okay.
Yeah. And even at this number, the way this, I'll show you the footprint in a minute, the floor plan rather in a minute, but basically on this side of the building are, this is the cafeteria commons area in the center here. This is the locker room and gym. There's an auditorium building here. And then the academic parts wrap around the other 3 sides of the courtyard. This is sort of the result of those diagrams that we did during visioning that said we'd like to be able to have sort of the public areas of the building and we can close off the rest of the school. This also shows 2 main entrances on the front of the building. One of them is on the right is the main entrance, you might say, for the school. On the left is the equivalent of this entrance here, next to Cosmo and Culinary, which could be supervised and locked, and the public only comes into the building that far and goes into each of the adjacent shops. And then around the back of the school, on the bottom of the plan, are all the high bay shops. But because the site is tight here, we can't even get all of the high bay shops on the first floor. We're actually in this option locating one of them on a second floor. This is at least a two-story solution. It might even be a partial three-story solution, depending on whether we go to 975 or stick with 900. And we typically, all of these options too are showing different ways to orient the circulation of cars and buses. In this case, it does flow kind of like your traffic does today. It comes in one driveway, goes around and out the other driveway. Although that driveway on the right, you can see there's the house. It's pushed further east towards the house in order to fit these athletic fields in here. And it does allow then a nice long drop off for parent pickup and drop off. And the buses would circulate behind the building here, that you can see yellow buses back there. So the students would exit, at various points around the backside of the building in the afternoon. And the buses could queue up on the backside, and we get that separation there. But there are other ways to handle this, and they're sort of mix and match as to, there's different building configurations and different site configurations. And you can see with the athletic field, we're trying to recreate and improve on what the school has currently. A track with a football or rectangular field, let's call it multi-purpose, in the infield, a baseball field, and currently it's an overlapping softball field. You can see we're trying to give a independent softball field there. We're thinking about, we need a wastewater treatment plant somewhere. We'd like to build that in the first phase so that we could connect the building to it, but the leaching field might still be in the front yard for that, and we pump to it from some location. Those are the variables.
Have you found courtyards valuable space?
Schools have found them useful in that they're outdoor spaces where you can, both from a safety and security point of view, that visitors or strangers aren't wandering in there, the students aren't wandering off. So in that sense, they're contained. And when they're located, you can see this commons room. Where's my mouse? There it is. This commons room is the cafeteria as well. It could spill out and have outdoor dining and be useful from that. You could also have an outdoor classroom there.
I just went to a high school that had one, and they tried using it when they first put it in.
Yeah.
And I know it was a long time ago. But they found the kids in the courtyard disrupted the classrooms because of the windows. And so they stopped using it, and then the only time they went out there was to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
In the courtyard.
Yeah.
And so I just
We try to
know
be.
the problem of, in the
We try to
window.
be sensitive to that and keep like just a central pathway so that people don't end up near the building, and you could have berms a little bit to separate it, and some planting, although you want to be careful. You don't want much planting there because it gets overgrown. It's hard to maintain. It's hard to mow the grass. We
Right.
minimize how much grass
Yeah.
is in courtyards too. But
Just
it can be, and it's a way to have a fairly compact plan and get light still into all the spaces and windows.
No, that way, the light from the windows, I understand.
So here you can see a little bit more the program spaces as to how they work. So the main entrance is here. And we'd always recommend having some administrative space immediately adjacent there, and that's a secure entrance where you can check in people, welcome people in a secure way. But it can also be the event entrance. If there is a multi-purpose kind of auditorium in the space, this commons area would be the lobby for that. And in order to save space, what we've done in this design, and we've done in some other designs, we locate the gym on top of the locker rooms, not next to it. So that there are so many things in this plan that want to be on the ground floor. We try to find as many as we can stack as possible. And the gym is one of those we can stack You can have a primary stair to get up there for visitors for, to attend a basketball game. And you can have direct stairs from the locker rooms to the gym. It's not an unusual configuration. And the locker rooms could be below, the weight room and fitness room can be below in that case. And it works out fairly well as a way to save on the footprint. And then you can see all of the high base shops that can wrap around the backside where they can get access from, with overhead doors and deliveries and so forth. And then on the inside of the plan, you might say, fronting on the courtyard can be some classrooms or some science labs in this plan. And culinary and cosmetology can be off of, a customer entrance. There could be a teacher's room and there could be some adult presence there too. So there are adults in that part of the building. So that's, a first floor plan. On the second floor, we would stack, here's the electrical shop is on the upper floor. It's one of those, yes, it does get deliveries, not quite as frequently as some of the other shops. And it can still have a high ceiling, it can still be high bay. We'd certainly, in all of these, we'd soundproof the floor ceiling construction. And we could locate the low bay shops of health and graphics and computer technology above the shops below. But you can see, they step back from the edge of the building below. They're so much smaller in footprint. But then we'd have the balance of the classrooms up here wrapping around the courtyard again. And there you can see the gym. And this is a kind of multi-purpose auditorium. We're suggesting it's double height. You could enter at either floor, have a little balcony on the second floor and the flat floor on the first level. And the library media center, it can be up
And what would be the square footage on the auditorium?
It's somewhere around 6,000 square feet, I think. That's variable. It depends on how many seats you want. I think what we're planning is perhaps half of the student population, not the entire student body, but maybe half of it would be an appropriate number of seats for an auditorium.
Carl, can you comment, you talked before about the flexible furniture in an auditorium.
Yeah.
How does that idea factor into that space?
Yeah, this is one way that you could get multiple use out of that space, because it is expensive and it's valuable space you're building. You want to use it more than just, you can see how your current multi-level lecture hall doesn't get as much use as a classroom or as other spaces. It does have some valuable use for performances and so forth. They do make systems of auditorium seating that are like bleachers that can be retracted. So you can have a flat floor, and you can use it for other events, other programs. Being next to the gym, one school is actually using it for their wrestling program. They can, when they need a flat floor after school, retract the seat, they can use it for that. So it is a possibility. You don't have, a formal music program or a formal drama program. You do have clubs and after school activities that could make use of it as an auditorium, but it might be something, that we want to consider. And again, right now, we might want to bake it into the program. And then once we see the numbers, we can always cut back. It's better from a design point of view, it's better from the state point of view to start a little bit higher and come down as opposed to go the other way. But that's certainly your decision, school committee's decision as to what should be in the program. So that's the way this plan works. And again, if we had to go to a larger enrollment, we'd probably have a third level of classrooms on the front of the building in order to get enough classrooms. And each of the shops would have to grow a little bit. These second floor ones can certainly accommodate that. It makes the ground floor that much tighter, though. So the next one is, it's, you could call it a linear, even though it's bent, it's a more linear arrangement of spaces. Still those public spaces on the right-hand side, the shops on the back side. Here, the front of the building, you might say, facing Webster Street, is and culinary and administration. There are really no academic spaces on the first floor here. So the footprint of the building gets to be a little bit smaller. We can get all the high bay shops on the ground floor here, and we can get a little bit more parking and drop-off area in the first phase because of the way the building kind of conforms to the available site there. with a service area behind, with a drop-off area in front. This plan shows an alternative for how the athletic fields might be laid out, and also how the circulation might work. This one suggests having the ingress very close to the property line there. There is a little bit of wetlands here that we'd have to deal with in this corner right in front of us. Out here at Webster Street, there's a head wall of a drainage pipe from a wetland across the street that's dumping water and created a wetland on your property here. That we have to deal with, but the idea is to get as wide a sort of circulation loop as possible, coming in one side and going out the other side, again, right by the house, the existing house there. And all the parking ends up inside of that drop-off lane. And this also suggests that the cars for pickup and drop-off go across the middle of the site here with a sidewalk all along there. So for drop-off or pickup in the afternoons, kids could get in on the passenger side of the car as it drives through in a one-way direction. And buses could queue up in front of the school, not in back, if that's more desirable. Along the front here would be buses only, during pickup hours and drop-off. There could be some, administrator and visitor parking, customer parking across the front too, for easy access to the doors. And again, the layout of the floor plan is very similar, and it's just in a different configuration now with all the vocational spaces, the high bay ones on the first floor, and then 3 floors, 2 floors above it. So it's a 3-story building. Again, with Allied Health, computer technology and graphics on the upper level, some classrooms on each of the upper 2 floors. And then a third configuration for the building instead of being kind of linear, has wings to it. More like, in a sense, the way this 92 edition was built, with wings, you might say, that create service areas not behind the building, but kind of in courtyards between programs. Behind the school would really just be a driveway, not very wide, not enough to maneuver and back up into the building. The service would be, on the edges in the service ports. And again, this shows a slightly different access of coming down the middle here between the baseball and track. We think, one thing to consider as you approach the school, this is about the same entrance point that exists today on Webster Street. You get a better view of the building across the field. Over here in the corner, on that other one, you're looking across, some backstops and some fences, and right along the property line, it's not as nice, and welcoming, you might say, an approach. We'd want to study that, and we could do some quick 3D renderings to show you what that might look like. But what it does then, by coming in kind of more in the center of the site, you do end up with some parking on one side of the drive, and so you're going to have some pedestrian traffic crossing a road. So there's some considerations there in that regard that are pluses and minuses. We also, we're showing, for instance, this softball field over here. This is kind of where you park buses now on the side, but there's also some land there that was developed and cleared of trees for use by the horticulture program. Conservation Commission may give us a hard time saying, well, you told us that was going to be a horticulture program. Now you're, trying to use it, put a wastewater treatment plant there or put the softball field there. That might, be a little bit of a challenge trying to change what they may perceive as a change in use that close to some adjacent wetlands. It may be another reason why in each of these options, we do show down the bottom of the plan there, this arrow. This is that where the football or the track is right now, where we want to cross the wetlands to get to the upland. That might be, maybe we could put a softball field there. There's enough land to do that. Maybe we could put some parking there.
Yes, the beginning of Walnut Hill.
Yeah.
It's a big incline.
There's a knob there that looks like, we haven't done a boring or a test pit there, but it could be rock. Because it looks like it goes up and down, like you'd see in a.
I grew up there.
Okay. And again, it would have some impact on those butters. That's different than today. We have to think about that too. these are the, by the way, these are sort of what we'd like you to think about going forward too, is the criteria that we collectively want to use to evaluate these options against one another. Things like impact on abutters or image from the street, not just cost, though that's certainly important as well, but we want to make a list of criteria that collectively we use to evaluate these 5 options. In kind of an objective way, we like to say sort of unemotional way, that can, you know, kind of stand up. How well does it meet the educational program is certainly an important criteria in any project. So then we want to show you after these two addition renovation options.
Carl, can I interrupt you for a
I'm
second?
sorry.
George, did you have a?
Oh, I'm sorry, George.
That's
Yes.
okay, excuse me. I wondered which of the ones, the 3 we've sort of looked at, which one would be the easiest for snow removal?
Well,
Because I wondered if the service yard, you know, it's
Yeah.
like a
Yes.
dead end kind of thing?
that's tricky in and of itself. What we mentioned is the site plan and the configuration of the parking lots where you have to plow snow and deal with. They're kind of mix and match. They're not necessarily married to any one building design. So certainly if we go back, let me see if we go back to one that's a little more straightforward, like this one.
Yeah.
Depending on if we get rid of those peninsulas, if they're only painted and not curved, the snowplow guy will love us. Because
Yeah.
he can just go right down the row
Yeah.
and push it all in one direction, away from a wetland and have some snow storage areas. So yes, we'll think about that. And, you know, that's one advantage of this option here, although like we said, you know, having the driveway over here or the approach point be up in that upper left corner
Yeah.
is not the ideal spot for, you know, kind of seeing the building in the background, but it does make a more rational kind of plan, straightforward plan for parking. And it's easy to plow and
Yeah.
monitor the snow. You can see there's some green areas too, and islands here that would also be used for stormwater management,
Yep.
so-called rain gardens.
Yep.
And things like that.
One of the
Yeah.
things that I like about, several of them included it, it's the main entrance and you come into a space that just opens up for you like that.
Yes.
That's dramatic.
Yeah.
I think it, would not be claustrophobic.
We showed that actually during visioning in a couple of examples, and people did support that and endorse that kind of notion, not just for being sort of welcoming but also for becoming functionally kind of like the heart of the school.
Yeah.
It's a space where kids could hang out early in the morning.
Yeah.
Certainly it's, you know, cafeteria at lunchtime. It's also the lobby for the gym and the auditorium as well. So, and then the other 2 options, like we said, are addition renovations. Just to refer to them, one is more L-shaped and one has a small courtyard. It's more of a light well in this case, but the strategy with these, both of these, kind of follow the same, even though the details vary, of suggesting that there's a construction zone that we have to turn over to the contractor, take out of use from the school, but keep the school in operation somehow, during the construction phase. And fortunately, with the property that you picked up next door, the house, and a potential new driveway there from Webster Street, the school could get into and out of the site independent of the contractor, who might come in, you know, more directly from Webster Street. And, you know, depending on what happens at the other end, on the right-hand end, as we're looking at this, that could still be the driveway right out here by the culinary entrance, could still be the school. So you might still be able to circulate around the school. We'd have to think about how do we handle parking, because you're gonna lose parking at the front of the school. In some of these options, things like that. And some of the options do consider partial demolition as a first phase too. So before we can demolish anything, we need to replace that space temporarily. And so this just shows in a kind of placeholder that there'd be some need for so-called modular classrooms or modular office space. Maybe they could be, you know, parked in the parking lot. Maybe they're parked in the house next door's backyard or, and, you know, maybe we have to, you know, look at, parking on a temporary basis somewhere, off, you know, where the buses now park, and we find a new home for the buses off-site even. So those are trade-offs. You know, with the new construction, you have to find a new home for the athletic teams to have practice and games. In the addition renovation options, you have to find a new home for some parking, perhaps, or for the buses.
This might be the football field.
Yeah, it might be the football field, and find a new home for them, that's right. So, and then, you know, that construction zone would then allow you to build some new space. While again, the existing school for the most part stays in operation. We'll show you the more detailed plans. This is just sort of the conceptual option here. And then the existing building would have to be renovated in phases. You know, hopefully you could empty out part of the building into the new construction, give the contractors sort of bite-sized pieces of the existing building in, you know, say 1 semester phases. You know, during the fall, they work on this wing, during the spring, they work on this next, and so on, and work their way around the building. To show you the plans on how these would work. This is the L-shaped piece, it's a 2-story addition. And it does anticipate the demolishing the office wing and the guidance and allied health wing at the front of the school as the first phase, so that we can replace it with 2-story construction and build, in essence, a whole new piece of construction across the front of the building facing Webster Street. More or less in close to the same location. If you can see that dotted line under there, that's kind of where the front of the building is now. You see right down here, where my cursor is. So you could almost keep the same drop off, the same parking, same leaching field in the end. But we just get an opportunity to build 2 stories of new space to, you know, satisfy the program requirements. And in this case, you know, in order to expand some of the shops, there'd be, you know, reconfiguration and trade-off of some of those high bay spaces. We'd have to build some new vocational space as part of the new school here. So we're showing a new electric shop, new advanced manufacturing and engineering, graphics, allied health, and computer technology on the 2nd floor. And again, this is a proposal saying, well, if we want a new gym that doesn't meet the 12,000 square foot size, we're showing it on the 2nd floor, stacked over locker rooms again, that are built kind of off to where the science wing, and there's green area there now that has some potential. If we slightly rearrange the driveway that goes around the back side of the building. And we could then convert the existing gym into that multi-purpose auditorium space with retractable auditorium seating perhaps as a way to reuse that. This would also require, as we talked about, expanding the cafeteria. We could do that into what now becomes a courtyard. What's now kind of an open 3-sided courtyard would become enclosed. And then basically the academic space would be on the front of the building along with administration on a couple levels here, including reusing the classrooms that do exist now and renovating and reconfiguring the vocational accounts. Again, there'd be phasing involved. You can't build it all at once. You can build the new construction pretty much all at once. But the renovation is probably going to be in 2 or 3 or 4 different phases as the contractor works their way around the building. The other option, this is one that we had looked at earlier, like 3, 4, 5 years ago when we were talking about it, says, okay, we'll leave the front of the building, but maybe we take down the science addition and replace that with 2 stories of construction around the gym, sort of, but in a courtyard configuration so that we can get light into classrooms on both sides of this courtyard space here. This really becomes a light well. It's not meant to be occupied. It's really just a light well to get light into those spaces around there. And again, we have to do some expansion then over on the current vocational wing to expand carpentry, to expand manufacturing, to expand HVAC, and some bits of new construction, and again, expanding the cafeteria. And this says, perhaps we live with the existing gym. We could redo the locker rooms, the girls' locker room, the boys' locker room, they get renovated. But we live with the existing size gym and expand and add on the academic spaces around again, 2 floors. This one, we have to say, actually, both of these new addition options would be kind of a struggle to get the 975 students here. 900 is very tight as it is, so they don't lend themselves to the higher enrollments. These would be more probably suitable, because to get you know, the current metal fab, automotive, electrical into those existing spaces, as they start getting up to 900 student enrollment, they have to expand even beyond this. It'd be a tough challenge there. So we just we will study that and show, you know, if it is feasible, what it would mean. You know, we probably end up, this addition to carpentry, where's my right there, and MET shop is only aligning currently with the metal fab addition. We probably have to go all the way out to this wing here to expand all of those shops. So we're losing more parking, and you know, we're increasing the need for parking. So we're kind of hurting ourselves both ways, taking away parking and increasing the enrollment and number of teachers and students that require parking. That would be the challenge in trying to go to higher numbers with these options. So those are the 5 options that we're studying, and obviously there's some variations to each of them, but we will be developing a little bit further here and sharing it with you. One of the things we'll want to do when we submit the preliminary design program at the end of this month is to say, do we want to continue considering all 5 of these options going forward? You don't have to. You could say, well, we can dismiss a couple of them out of hand or not. We're perfectly willing to you know, continue to study them in the next phase and make that final selection, you know, by December. We don't have to. Some projects we end up with maybe 6 or 7 or 8 design options, and the committee will say, well, let's narrow it down to, you know, to 3 or 4. That's too many. We know that some are lesser desired or supported anyways. So if we do want to do that, that decision would be made when we, you know, come to you back in at the end of September and say, you know, we recommend continuing or not, and you can vote on it at that time. We'll get it to you in advance as well. Then we want to follow up on a point made about lessons learned and try to share with you something at each sort of milestone in the project. So I'll start off with one. We'll be, Leftfield will have some, you know, next time too with their experience. One of the ones that I could share with you from feasibility phase of a project that kind of say early permitting. We were lucky on this project that I'm talking about, where in addition to like local conservation commissions and local planning and zoning boards, there are also state agencies that oversee these projects. The lesson learned here was we want to check with those agencies early on, and we want to check with them right up to the date that we make a submission too, because sometimes their boundaries and their requirements change at the last minute, and we're not grandfathered automatically just because we started thinking about this project early on. So we had this project where it was next to some woodlands, and the state through their, I think it's Fish and Wildlife Division, identifies areas of critical habitat. And when we looked at this site, the site for the proposed building, it was free and clear. The day we submitted, or like the month before, when we submitted, the map changed. And suddenly this area was now an area of critical habitat in the state, which had, you know, serious implications about being able to clear trees and build a new school in that site. Fortunately, the reason we were lucky was we did file with the Conservation Commission a plan to identify the wetlands at a certain time that preceded the new map. And so we were lucky. There was a grandfathering clause in the Fish and Wildlife Regulation that said, if you had done that with conservation, it does allow you to be grandfathered. but otherwise, we would have been in for a shocking surprise. And so, we've learned in our consultants to check those maps early and often because they have serious implications on the buildability. And likewise, it does show the value of submitting that plan to the Conservation Commission early to nail down the wetlands. Because it does, apparently, not only does lock us into the wetland delineation, it does have some other implication on some other habitat and environmental regulations. So we've learned that lesson and we'll carry it forward with our consultants going forward. So, thanks. I know that was a lot of information. The thing we'd like to leave you with, certainly if you have feedback now on what you saw, we'd love to hear that. But we also, like we said, want you to think about what's important to you as criteria in evaluating these options going forward and share that with us too, because that will help us in sort of looking at the variations and options. And maybe, you know, if you say, well, we really do care about whatever, the front door image of the school, we'll think about how that, you know, affects the site plan and so forth. So,
You guys all set?
yep,
Yeah, all set?
people online, good,
Anybody
yeah.
out there and
Still awake?
Jim,
Okay.
one question, we talked about doing road trips. Is that something that is, do we know when, on your timeline that you presented earlier, at what point do we begin road trips?
I think what we had been talking about as a group is maybe October after we submit the PDP, once we're looking forward to kind of narrowing our selections, to have other projects in mind, will help kind of, you know, help you point out, I like this, I like that, I don't like this is bad, you know, to kind of take those ideas and compare them
It
against.
seems like, yeah, that's the time when we'll be focusing on, you know, choosing a preferred option and, right now we're focused on a little bit more, you might say, in terms of the program and the Chapter 74 programs and enrollment numbers. October, would be a good time to look at some other projects that have some similar issues, similar spaces to what's being proposed here. We can take you to addition renovation projects, that have some lessons learned and to some new construction projects too.
So we will start coordinating that so that get everybody on the, get it on everybody's calendars, get a couple of key options,
Bob Mello and Jack, do you have any questions?
Well, I'll throw mine in. The only thing is that I'm going to review all these before I give any comments whatsoever. There's, you know, 5 options there, and it's awful
Okay.
quick to make any decisions one way or the other.
Oh, amen to that. Jack, you all set?
I'm all set.
Robert, Mello?
Yeah, no, I looked at these earlier. I do kind of like plan number 2. I'd like to also know a little bit more about the number of parking spaces that are proposed for plan number 2 as well. Obviously, that's a big issue with us in many fronts, but yeah, plan 2 seems to be, I think, the most feasible for us, given what was presented tonight. You know, that's just my opinion right now, but I'm interested in seeing what other people have to say.
Thank you.
Bob, the theme is carpooling. Carpooling, that is they are gonna say that.
We actually do reward people who carpool, usually have a few reserved spots, you've seen those signs, you know, if you carpool, you can park near the front door. Otherwise, you're in the tail end of the parking lot.
And just one other point to Bob Mola's earlier point, when the school committee meets on September 20th, we're gonna have some representation. We could post it as a joint meeting of the school committee and the school building committee to allow for a sliver of the agenda if there's any follow-up. So school committee members as well as other SBC members, we could make that posting arrangement to allow for a slightly wider conversation in a couple of weeks.
Tom, a comment to you to begin with on your carpooling. It doesn't work on the expressway. It won't work in Hanover.
Half the kids can't have people in their car.
Yeah, that's true too. They
Yeah,
just get
this is good.
permit, yeah.
This is gonna be a theme about where do we fit it all, but that's the fun part. That is what we've been waiting to do. So let's begin.
There's another option I'll throw out now. Give up our site and maybe they'll give us a bigger site over at the Hanover Fireworks and have a whole new facility.
I'm laughing, Bob, because that's probably 20 years away before they get it cleaned out. No.
If you put a casino in it, they'll do it overnight, Bob.
Is it a former dump? Yeah.
National fireworks, land by Vietnam, and they dump them all in the brook and then.
So they probably give away the land for free and clean it up.
Yeah, and then you got the Rockwood Fire,
Yeah.
burning, right, keep it up. Keith, you have any questions?
No questions at this time. I'm excited to see all of these drawings. I like different parts of all of them. I'm excited about the process and looking forward to, seeing this be completed in the near future. And I was looking forward to seeing the parking garage on the plans, but I don't see that there yet. So maybe that's in the next phase.
The ground.
It could be. Yeah, wetlands.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Functionality and space for students is the most important thing, right? Functionality during the school day and functionality for athletics, extracurriculars, for having a whole school life, that's the most important thing. But once the bloom is off the rose, I wonder how important it is that there's visual appeal from the roadside for the building. So at the beginning, nobody cares that no one can see the building because it's a wonderful new place in Hanover. But in 10 years, 15 years, and what's that place back there down that road? What do they do there? What's that South Shore Tech? I wonder if that is, how important that is in the longevity of the relationship of the schools, the community. This being a place where we want it to be fully functioning and staffed all day, every night, all summer long, as it is now. I wonder does that matter? What?
No, it's interesting you say that, because Whitman Hanson built their new high school up in the back.
And in the woods.
In the woods, and then they tore down the old one, right, which some people wanted it to be a regional middle school. That being said, and so in the front, the only way you know there's a school there is because there's a sign there, right? I'm not a big fan of having fields out front, so people on Webster Street, they see the fields. East Bridgewater's, West Bridgewater, they're like that. I'm not a big fan of that. I think if they see the building, right, and they can go, wow, nice, you know what I mean? You see the baseball field, football field, they're all the same. But a school, they can see exactly where their money was spent. Kind of like, the Southeastern, it's on, right? You can, that's all you can see the school. It's like, it's huge.
Did you see their new round theater?
Huh?
Did you see their new round theater there?
Yeah.
Right? That's why it's in front. They wanted that image on the street. We did that.
Yeah, but the thing is, some of the things that I've learned is that there's things that you want, but you should look at your needs first, and I don't want to price us out of not getting a new school.
And that, I think, Dan, is where the overlay of design, cost, enrollment, they're gonna have a continuous cycle and pressure test all of it and make this, and I believe that's where we would have to make those tough choices.
Tough decisions, and in my town, we renovated a middle school and we closed a couple elementaries and we enlarged the two other elementaries that we had. But the middle school, that's a project that they want, and what is it, 180 million now? Up to, but the thing is it was renovated. I may be wrong on the full price, but it was renovated not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, whatever, right, when they redid it. But when they renovated it, they didn't work together, so the roof always leaked. Right, because one company was doing this, another company was doing that, one was behind, the other one said, well, too bad, we're gonna do our thing. Right, and they didn't work together. And, so now there was leaks all over the place, mold, mildew, was never taken care of, and now they want to bring it to school.
Well, I'll have to go along with Sandy. It's all about the education of the students and how many students we can do it to.
Right, yep.
That's what it comes down to.
100%.
If we,
Just thinking about, we are different than a a local town school, a traditional comprehensive high school, where that's where you go, it doesn't really matter.
You
Where
have
it
to
is,
go.
that's where you're going.
Definitely.
But for us, it is a marketing proposition. We do have to market ourselves and the market may shift. And I think how we present visually is a part of how we market ourselves.
okay, guys, I'm saying good night.
Okay. All right, that's your bedtime? You got, okay, thank you. And public comment, is there anybody from the public that would like to say anything? For social? No. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So Whitman, Rockland. Okay, roll call. Bob Hayward, yes. Tom Hickey.
Yes.
Keith Porter,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
Yes.
Bob Mello,
Yes.
Bob Mulder already adjourned. Dan Salvucci.
Yes.
And Sandy.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, Chris.